Terinde sondol pepe ari kugi buri nashun pom samalala ngara gir ngone senju pishun kasha ngone samdita tashtile yu I was told that it would be better to talk in English. It's a bit funny. We all Tibetans and talking in some foreign language, and the speaker is not familiar with this language. Anyhow, I will use my broken English in order to communicate with you better. The Office of Tibet in New York was planning this conference for a long time, and is in accordance with His Holiness' wish and vision that to interact with the younger generation of our race, which has a great responsibility, and also facing the race, a great challenge of destruction, and we all are at the verge of extinction from the surface of the earth. A great nation having more than 2,000 years of recorded history, a race of an intelligentsia, a community of scholars and genius people, small in number but great in wisdom and scholarly work. On this earth, no any other nation which have produced such enormous scholarly work, translations, original writings, and immense scholars have been created in a short spell of time, around 12 to 1300 years, and with population of not more than 6 million all the time. Yet we have a great, great treasure of wisdom and literature. No any other nation can compare with us. India, a great nation, having more than 100 million of population, with 7,000 years of history, have not produced scholarly work comparing with the scholarly work of Tibet for a short spell of history. This great nation is now reduced to almost at the verge of disappearing, assimilating under the huge demographic change designed by the PRC about 14, 15 years back. One of the Tibet Affairs workshop has come up with the idea that demographic change is the final solution to the Tibet problem. And it happened today. The tiny 6 million people of Tibet have been overwhelmingly the large number of non-Tibetan population are roughly estimated around 8 to 8.5 million. Particularly after the arriving of railway line in Lhasa, the population transfer have been geared up immensely. So this is a big question, how the nation will survive and continue the tradition. That is a question of our life, question for our nation, a question for each one of us. The topic given to me this afternoon was the movement of Tibet, or the Tibet movement, and role of youth. The future of the Tibet movement and the role of youth. I don't know how to deal with this important but huge question. I don't know within a time spell of an hour how much we will be able to discuss in depth about this question. Before talking anything, I think I should talk about the method of communication as the Tibetan Buddhist tradition talk about, without which we may not able to establish a dialogue between us. We might be just engage ourselves into monologue. For the purpose of establishing a dialogue between the speaker and the listeners, there are three necessary conditions which we shall have to create and which can be created. These three necessary conditions, as taught by Buddha and later on summed up by Acharya Arya Dev, the chief disciple of Nagarjuna, who have said that Surnen Loden Dunirwa Nyebu Nujichawarshi. You shall have to be a neutrality of mind, and you must have an intelligent mind, and also you have a certain degree of interest and curiosity. The first condition is to make the mind neutral, free from any prejudice, preconcepts, or things are taken for granted in accordance with one's own knowledge or information. If you have certain notion on certain subject in your mind, then the speaker might speak anything, but you will interpret or you will listen in accordance with your own notions or your own preconcepts. And similarly, you might have a certain idea about the subject or about the speaker. You might have certain idea, I know that subject, or I cannot know that subject, or I have no interest in that subject. Or sometimes you have great expectation from the speaker. He might have speaking new wisdom, new information, which might have a immediate benefit or result. Or you have taken for granted that the speaker does not know anything and he will not going to speak any useful. All these kind of preconditions or preconcepts are the greatest hindrance for establishing a dialogue between two people. So you have to open mind. Whatever the speaker would say, I will listen carefully and thereafter I will examine it. Not carried away by the speaker. You must have your own power of analyzing the matter. Without analyzing, taking for granted, whatever the speaker has said is one of the big defects of listening. Open mind, free from preconceptions, and willing to analyze it, inquiry into it, research into it. This kind of willingness is the one of the preconditions. Then the second is you must have your own independent way of thinking. You should not be taking for granted whatever the speaker has said. The Buddha himself has said to his disciples, do not accept my teachings because a Buddha have said it. You must examine it for yourself. The monks or the wise people should examine my teachings as a goldsmith examines the purity of the gold. Gilontakam, kenamchi. Sipche darve sirshintu, lepartalangaika, langorchai kuishrimin. You don't take my words because you have devotion or respect for Buddha. That is not the way to understand the Buddha's teaching. I think this is a bit unique. In Buddhism, there's no place for faith, blind faith, without knowing the taking things for granted, unknowing things which is being held in a belief of faith. That is not an intelligent way to understand things. So you must have the intelligent mind to examine each and everything up to the in-depth and in great detail. Only then you will able to understand the matter on which we are deliberating. And the third prerequisite is willing to learn, inquisitiveness, a kind of burning desire to get into the given subject, to analyze it and to understand it. So if you have these three prerequisites, then we might be able to establish a communication between us and dialogue between us. So I urge of you to look into your own mindset, and do you have these three prerequisite conditions to have dialogue with me in this afternoon. Coming to the future of Tibet movement, before analyzing the future of Tibet movement, you shall have to understand what does mean by the expression movement. In English language, I think movement has so many different kind of connotation. I move my hand, I move my lips, all these are momentum, or movement. Whatever is moving from one place to another place, that is called movement. But in a certain context, the movement carries some different connotation. A political movement, a social movement, that means a planned and a concerted work which has aimed for certain goal and for which well-established methods have been adopted, and having graduation, a kind of roadmap, and within which you are doing something that is called movement. Popularly these days, the Tibet movement might be understood some kind of demonstration, signature camping, or doing some camping work, approaching to many individuals or groups to support the just cause of Tibet, or something like is called as a movement. But I think that is in a narrow sense of the word. But when we talk about Tibet movement, you shall have to understand this in real sense of the term, in its largest possible connotation. It includes the continuity of the process of the development of Tibetan spirituality, Tibetan social system, its political system, economic system, health, education, cultural. Each sphere has its own peculiar movement, and which can also encompass with each other, or combined as a one movement, or it can be divided into many different movements. Here, the movement must mean unceasing continuity of Tibetness, to preserve, to promote, to disseminate the Tibet wisdom. That is our movement. It might include the demonstrations, the agitation, the camping, and so many other things, but each one of these must be related for the continuum of Tibetness, the wealth of Tibet, that is, the wisdom and compassion, the combination of wisdom and compassion, which the Tibet people has preserved for the last more than 1,300 years, and it need to be preserved all the times to come for the benefit of all sentient beings. Tibet movement must not misunderstood as a selfish action. All the Tibet movement presently, under the distinguished leadership of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, it does not have anything which is only for the benefit of Tibetan people alone. There's no selfish motive. There's no ill-feeling for our opponent, particularly the authorities of PRC, the People's Republic of China, who are doing all kind of wrong and injustice for the Tibetan people, for the Tibet land, for the Tibetan environment. In spite of that, we do not have any kind of ill feeling or anger to those wrongdoers. This is the uniqueness of Tibet movement. And also, this movement does not have any place for the slightest of violence, directly or indirectly. If there is a violence, then you must understood this is not a part of Tibet movement. If Tibet movement does not have a present, then you cannot think of its future. We are talking about future, the present must be preserved in its original form, in its purest form. That is violence-free movement of social, economic, political, and spirituality, which everything comes together for the emancipation of all sentient beings, and particularly the people of China, people of Tibet. People of Tibet and people of China have lived the majority of the historical times immemorial, due to geographical situation, China and Tibet lived as neighbors. There are very few tiny time, there are wars and violence. Otherwise, the majority of the thousands of history are living in peace as brothers and sisters, helping each other. The momentary antagonism accidentally happened should not overrule the long-standing friendship and goodwill. A family member, two family members, or perhaps brothers or sisters or husband, wife, the majority of their life lived in a friendship, love, and understanding. For a few hours or for a momentarily, there might be arguments and disagreement and fighting with each other. That momentary fighting should not be replace the long-term understanding of friendship. That is the exactly same situation between the people of Tibet and people of China. Even today, very tiny minority of the PRC authorities are doing all kind of injustice for the people of Tibet, but the large majority of Chinese people are very friendly. They have immense sympathy for Tibet. they have immense devotion for His Holiness the Dalai Lama. It can be seen everywhere. Last year, when His Holiness gave cultural initiation in Amaravati, thousands of Chinese people took risk and attended that initiation. It means that among Chinese people, they have so much devotion and respect for Tibetan Buddhism, for the Tibetan Buddhist teachers, and particularly His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. Today, if you visit to Tibet and the holy places, the majority of pilgrimage in these places are Chinese Buddhists. Tibetan monasteries the monks are being sustained by the material offering from the Chinese pilgrimages. So we should not mix up the people and the government. The governments are functioned with directives of very few people, and the vast majority of people does not have anything to do with that, particularly a dictative country like a totalitarian country like PRC. The majority people have no say, no power to participate in the process of their political system. So therefore, our movement is for the people of China. As much as for the people of Tibet, that much is for the people of China, for the people of the world, for the people of the entire universe, entire sentient being, not only the humanity. Our work is, our movement is for entirety of the sentient being, for the well-being and emancipation of the entirety of the sentient being, for which the cultural, spiritual, and ancient wisdom tradition of Tibet cannot be lost. The humanity cannot bear, the humanity cannot lost this tradition, this unique lineage. It is so precious for each sentient being, each individual. In order to preserve that, we must achieve certain social, political, economic freedom. To that end, with 100% commitment to non-violence, adopting a middle path policy, that action, that process is the present Tibet movement. And its future, of course, the future is in your hand, in the hands of the younger generation. We, the older generation, does not have any right to advise or to dictate or to guide to you what you should do or what you should not do. Therefore, I have nothing to preach you what is the role which needs to be played by the youth. You shall have to find your own role. If I tells you what role you should play, then that would be just a hearsay or just a information which without proper processing you believe in it. that will not carry any weight. The older generation, the past time, the past history, these are only a source of information or a subject of evaluation. It does not dictate you any course of action. The course of action you must find out for yourself. What role you have to play, that you shall have to find for yourself. If your inner conscious, if your own wisdom tells you the ongoing moment is useless, we need not play any role in it. You can make that decision. Nobody would stop it. We have no grudge. You are born in human form in the race of Tibet. If you feel you have certain birth responsibility, then you shall have to find out for yourself what is your natural and what is your inherited responsibility. We, the Tibetans, as a follower of Buddha, do not speak at any time about rights. Right is a natural flow. The importance is duty, the responsibility. In the modern world, everybody in the modern world, particularly in the Western world, the right comes before the responsibility. That creates so many problems. If a human responsibility are given importance and being performed properly, there would not be any cases of violation of human right. Without paying attention to human responsibility, you can never protect the human rights at any cost. The universal so-called Declaration of Human Rights, now more than 50 years has passed, it's nearing to 60 years, and during which period the highest human rights violations are being taking place in Tibet, in China, in many other worlds. Even today, there are so many nations and countries before our eyes. What is happening recently in Burma? Our fellow Buddhist monks are come out in the streets and they are brutally beaten up and imprisoned and tortured for nothing. I think the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century are the worst time as far as human rights violations and violence is concerned. Ever increasing violence, terrorism, and human rights violation. That is only due to we have forgotten to pay attention to human responsibility, particularly the universal responsibility which we human beings do have. The unique teaching, the unique legacy of our beloved leader, His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, is his teaching of universal responsibility. His teaching of universal responsibility has inspired millions of people around the world. But I don't know how many Tibetan younger generation have read, have studied, or have understood the teaching of universal responsibility of His Holiness. There might be a time you have to learn His Holiness teachings from the Western teachers. Because very few Tibetan people, it may be older generation or younger generation, things are taken for granted, and they are not much inquisitiveness and desire to study His Holiness' unique teachings. Once you find your own universal responsibility, and in that context, universal responsibility can only be performed through locally. The ancient in-age proverb, think globally, act locally. That is a natural flow. You cannot act universally. You can only think universally. So once you understood the universal responsibility of yourself, then you will very well know what your role to be played in the context of Tibet movement. If your mind is agitated, you are full of anger, you are thinking about taking revenge from authorities of PRC, then I am afraid you may not be able to play any role in the non-violent movement of Tibet in future. So my presentation in a nutshell is that the continuum of Tibetan culture and spiritual heritage is the real Tibet movement, which is very much alive today. And its future is in your hand. I have nothing to advise you how to play your own role in this process. I only can urge you, open your mind, use your rationality, and find for yourself what is your role for the future of the Tibet movement. That's all I wanted to say. There's 15 minutes more, which I will leave for your comments or perhaps some questions. Thank you for your attention.